All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Carol Lopez. I am the president of Florida Animal Rescue Alliance. A little bit about us. We rescue mainly farm animals from slaughter or in inhumane conditions. But aside from that, our very important mission is to help sanctuaries from the state of Florida and provide volunteers. A little bit about this presentation today is pretty much to help everyone who's coming in today and the people that are within our communities empower themselves and to gain some very valuable information to just be able to help out within the communities. And without further ado, our Director of Marketing, Nicole.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole, and I am a volunteer board member with Florida Animal Rescue Alliance, along with Carol, our president. And I am going to be hosting this webinar today. We felt like this was going to be a really, really important webinar because even though we mostly rescue farm animals, we also have, a lot of contacts with other animals such as cats, dogs, rabbits, and we get so many requests and so many calls from them, from people about this, that we felt like we needed a webinar to address pretty much all of the animals that we get calls about, to empower everybody to begin to take action in the community so that they know what steps to take when they find an animal, because we're finding out not a lot of people know what to do. So without any further introduction, here we go. So let's say that you come across a stray or injured animal on your way to work. Everybody wants to help, but how do we help? We don't know. A lot of people don't know. I've heard all sorts of things, from as soon as somebody finds a dog, they start calling rescues, or they call the police, or they take the dog to the police station. They just don't know what to do. So we're going to tell you. Next. Okay, so if you find a dog, the most important thing that you should do is to never assume that the dog is a stray, which seems to be what a lot of people do. Never assume they're a stray. Always assume that they are somebody's dog, even if they look dirty. A lot of the dogs that I've found, even recently, not chipped, but people had cleaning person over, or workers over, something like that, and the dog slipped out. Of course, they'd be, securing their dog, but a lot of people, things happen, mistakes happen, and the dog gets out. So you don't assume it's a stray. So what do you do? Next slide. Step one, the very first thing before you do anything else is take the dog to be scanned for a microchip. This is the step that almost everybody misses. Don't miss it. That's the most important step. A lot of times, if there's a chip, you'll call the owner and the entire process will end there. The vets, any vet, any 24-hour vet, some police stations do have scanners. The Humane Society has a scanner. Basically, a lot of animal places have scanners. So usually if you find the owner, you'll get the number, you'll call them, you'll meet up, you'll give the dog back, end of story. Same thing if the dog has a collar. A lot of times they don't, but if the dog does have a collar, excuse me. If the dog has a collar, you'll also call the person on the collar, or they might have the tag number, which you can also then find out. If they don't have a microchip, you're going to move to step two. This has also been highly effective at finding dog parents. We just had this happen last week. A dog came into our complex and my son found it in front of my neighbor's house. And after there was no microchip, we went on all the lost dog groups on social for the area. So you're going to want to get on Facebook. Facebook has Lost Dogs of Miami, Lost Dogs of Broward, Pet Finder, all sorts of things. And you want to look to see if somebody posted that same dog there. Any dog that looks like it, reach out to the person. You can also take a photo and post the dog on there. Now, I do hear a lot of people get concerned because they're afraid that anybody could come up and say it's their dog, and they could. So yes, you do want to be careful, but usually when you meet with the person, you can tell by the dog's reaction. The dogs get super excited when it's their pet parent, so you don't really have to worry about that. You also want to put up real signs in the area that you found the dog. Hopefully your neighborhood, it makes it easier, but you can put up real paper signs if you have a printer everywhere. And then you can move to step 3, which will also be to talk to people in the area to see if they know whose dog it is. Walk around with the dog. You know, the person might be out looking for their dog, their neighbor might see you with the dog. So this is another easy way to find the parent. Now, if you do all of this and you cannot find the pet parent and you can't keep the dog, if you can keep the dog, keep looking. If you can keep the dog, there are programs that a lot of the places have, like the Humane Society and the county shelter, where you do not need to take the dog in, but they will have you hold the dog. They will help you and post and look for the owner as well. But if you can't hold the dog, or if it just seems hopeless, then you're going to need to move to step 4, which is to call all of the rescues in South Florida. And you might have to call a lot of them, but if you do keep calling, you will find one that has space to take the dog. And they might still keep looking for the owner as well, but you should be able to find somebody to take them. We are going to provide you with a link to a Google Doc later on through the meeting towards the end, that's going to have a list of contact. I have not finished it, but it'll keep updating as you have the link, so you'll have everything. And if you call them all, you'll find somebody. Next. So your whole goal is to find the dog a loving home or a foster family, or its original pet parents. That's the first goal. These are the secondary goals. So always remember, the goal is not just to get rid of the animal from your house as fast as possible. It's to find them a loving home or foster family. And that might be you. If nobody turns up and you love the dog, that might end up being you. We're going to have some questions also, just so everybody knows. You guys can ask as many questions as you want at the end of the webinar. So just make sure you jot down your questions, or you can even put them in the chat. So now we're going to move on to cats and kittens. I think everybody loves cats and kittens. Cats and kittens, and the information that I'm going to give you is very, very specific to South Florida. So if you're not in South Florida, and even more specifically in Miami, you're probably not going to follow these procedures. But this is the procedure for down here, because we do have such an incredibly high amount of the stray population. We have, I think it's 400,000 stray cats in Miami-Dade alone. So let's go to the next slide. When you find cats and kittens, we're going to talk about kittens first. If you're not in South Florida and you find a kitten, you're probably going to need to find a rescue or something right away. But if you're specifically in South Florida, they are usually born into what's called cat colonies, or homes with yards, because one of the cats from a colony got into a yard to find a safe place to have the kitten. You want to confirm that the kitten is safe. If the kitten is safe, you do not want to take the kitten anywhere. That's kidnapping here. They call it kidnapping. The kitten's best chances of survival are with his or her mom. So if you're removing the kitten and the mom comes back and her kitten is gone, that's just not, it's not the right thing to do. So you're going to want to monitor for about 24 hours to see if mom comes back. And if she does, you're going to want to give them all a comfortable place so that she can take care of them and you can keep your eye on them. So again, you're going to want to leave the kitten alone for the most part. Next slide. Next. Okay, so now if the mom does not come back, or if the kitten is in a dangerous location, like on a highway, in a dumpster, in a car, somewhere like that, and you can safely assume that the kitten is less than 8 weeks old, then you are going to want to rescue the kitten and immediately buy it kitten formula from a pet store. You do not ever want to give the kitten milk, not cow milk, not plant milk, no kind of milk. They can't tolerate it. It needs to be specific kitten formula with a special bottle for kittens. And kittens are easier to place than adult cats. So you're going to then need to contact all of the rescues to find placement. And the key is to call, because you will find someone to take the kitten if you call. Next. So now, let's say it's not a kitten and it's an adult cat. You're going to want to ask yourself, is the cat healthy or sick? And are its ears tipped? Ears being tipped is probably the most important. If the cat's ear is tipped, that means it is part of a cat community. It's a community cat, and there are feeders and people that are taking them for vaccines and for spay and neuter. It means the cat has been spayed and neutered and vaccinated. So you're going to want to leave the cat alone. It is a feral cat, and unless the cat is injured or sick, then if you can trap the cat, then you want to take it to the vet, or you can also contact a rescue if the cat is sick and you can't do that. I have a cat that I had found that had his ear tipped, and I had taken him to be neutered, but I couldn't see his ear was tipped because the fur had grown over it. But he's in my house now, but it turned out I went through all that like for nothing. So you might have to kind of get a good look at their ear to make sure that their hair hasn't grown back, but that's how it looks like in the photo that we have where it's tipped. Next. So if the cat is not sick and the cat is not tipped, are there cat colonies in the area? You can check around. And if there are, I would suggest talking to the feeder or other people in the area. It could be a new cat. It could also be someone's cat. So again, you're going to want to search on social and see if anybody has posted a missing cat. It's more rare than dogs, but it does happen. So you can check there. And definitely notify the feeder and let anybody that takes care of the cats in the area know, because they will take the cat then to be spayed, and also they'll make sure that the cat is eating and taken care of and everything like that. Next. Here's the last step. If there are no feeders, or if you want the cat to do something with the cat, you can also take the cat for TNVR, or you can keep the cat. For those that don't know, TNVR is trap, neuter, vaccinate, release. So in Miami-Dade, I believe Broward, I'm not sure about the rest of Florida, but in Miami for sure, it is free to have the cats vaccinated and spayed and neutered. So you just drop them off, and then you have to pick the cat up and you have to release them in the exact same area that they were before. Cats cannot survive being moved around to different colonies. They don't interact well. But you could also adopt the cat, or you could find the cat another loving home. So that's also up to you, as long as the cat is not already somebody else's cat. Next. Rabbits. You found a rabbit, now what? So believe it or not, we actually have a lot of rabbits running around in South Florida and in central East Coast of Florida now. There's been kind of a rabbit explosion. So you might find a rabbit. We do have wild rabbits also. So the first thing you need to find out is, did you find a wild rabbit or a domestic rabbit? So if you look at the screen, wild rabbits always look like this pretty much. They don't look any different. They're brown, they're small, and you need to leave them alone. Don't try to trap them or anything like that unless they're injured. And then you probably won't be able to trap it anyway. So you're going to need to call local wildlife center to come help you trap the rabbit and take care of him. But if you find a domestic rabbit, they come how they are on the screen in all different looks and shapes and sizes. You're probably going to find one after Easter, if you're going to find one at all. That's when people usually bunnies and then they dump them. I've found one in the bushes before, right after Easter. We had another one that I think Carol has that was from Miami-Dade. So let's go to the next slide and find out about baby rabbits. So like all babies, bunnies are also need their mom to have a good chance of survival. These look like wild rabbits. So you would leave these little baby bunnies alone, all the ones that are on the screen right now. So for the most part, you're going to leave them alone. Have a special guest here, Grace, who's going to speak in a little bit. She is a veterinary assistant and also studied zoology. What she has suggested that is the best step for baby bunnies is that you take a laundry basket with holes and cover the bunnies, because the mother can get in, but the predators can't. And that will ensure that the baby can, get food from their mother and not get hurt. But if the mother is really injured, then we would suggest that you carefully rescue them and call every rescue and sanctuary that takes rabbits, and also find out first if they are wild rabbits. They will usually be helped by a wildlife center, so that's another option. Next. If you find a healthy rabbit that's domesticated, that's a domestic rabbit, you can trap or contact a rescue to trap, because they're pretty hard to trap unless you have a lot of experience. Or you can also look for someone that's missing a rabbit, and then you can, either foster the rabbit or call all the rabbit rescues and sanctuaries. There's not that many, but we're going to put some in the list, and you would be able to call them then. If you have a sick rabbit, it's the same procedure. The rabbit just needs to go right to the vet. You can either take the rabbit to the vet if you're able to trap, or you can contact a rescue or sanctuary and they will be able to trap. Something else that I did not mention before is if a rescue or sanctuary is taking the animal, they're more likely to take the animal, especially if the animal is sick, if you make a donation. If you can't keep the animal, please make a donation. They're running on no funds, and it's very hard for them to make, to do all the treatments they need and to rescue animals, especially if they're low on funds. In fact, funds might be the only reason that they're not able to take the animal that you found. So if you're providing something towards that, that could make the difference between saving the animal or not saving the animal. Next. So let's say you find a pig or a goat. What do you do? Well, that's mostly where we would come in. If you find a pig or a goat, which you might think doesn't happen, but it does. So if you find a pig or a goat, you can call us or email us, Florida Animal Rescue Alliance, and we'll help you find placement for it. We have had pigs, somebody call that a pig was dumped in their neighborhood and running around. We have found pigs dumped by the Everglades. People get pigs when they're very small, and then when they get big, they don't want them anymore. So, and they do need to be fixed because they do make more pigs. Goats, not that common, but in Hialeah, where they do like Santeria, there have been goats found put out on the side of the road with strange things attached to them. So like money and other things. So if you do find a goat, also give us a call and we'll find placement. Next. Chickens. They're everywhere. I don't know if they're in other counties, but in Miami, there is also a chicken explosion. They don't usually live in the exact same place as the cats do. They kind of have made their own areas, I guess. So most sanctuaries will take hens if you have already taken them to a vet. We have had things, like the bird flu and everything. So they are very hesitant a lot of times to take in any kind of bird without, to risk their own bird population unless the bird has already been seen. So really, if the hen is not in danger, it's kind of better to just let it be. They're hard to catch anyway. You could contact us. We could see if we can help, but right now everybody is, at capacity. So it's very hard. They're not gonna be able to take the chicken and get the treatment and all of those things. If the chicken is sick, contact us. If you have a rooster, if you find roosters, which are also rampant all over Miami, they're very hard to place in a sanctuary, because when you put roosters together, they do tend to fight. I think the first time I volunteered with Carol, I broke up a rooster fight. So a lot of sanctuaries are just unwilling to take in a rooster. So if they're not in immediate danger, just let them be. If they are sick, you can let us know, or you can if you're able to catch the rooster, you can take them to a bird vet and then put them back where you found them. Next. Now we have native wildlife. We have a lot in Florida. So possums, squirrels, lots of birds, raccoons, and many animals that we see around are native. Any wildlife station will treat a sick or injured native animal and release them, except raccoons, which Grace will talk about later. Those have to be in a specialized place. But almost every, wildlife place will treat them. For the most part, for native wildlife, leave them alone. The only time you want to do anything is if they are in, very sick or injured. And then you want to take them. There's places like Seabird Station. There is a wildlife rescue in Fort Lauderdale. There's a few of them around, and they will take them. Some of them have 24-hour drop off, but you do need to make sure that it is native wildlife. You should always Google Lens the animal first, especially if it's a bird, because a lot of native species and invasive species look the same, and they will not take an invasive species and might be required to euthanize the bird. So you're going to want to Google Lens, call them and ask them if it's native or non-native. And if they say it's non-native, just put the animal back. Next. Now we also have non-native species here. Lots of them. Some of the most rampant are Muscovy ducks and iguanas. We also have boa constrictors, pigeons, which are everywhere, but still some unknown reason considered non-native, and some other birds that come in from the south and go back and forth. If you find a non-native species, none of the wildlife centers are going to take them in, and very few sanctuaries will take them. I don't even know if there's any for iguanas, but for Muscovy ducks, there are a few very specialized sanctuaries. So if you do find an injured Muscovy duck, contact us and we'll see if we have anywhere for them that they can be placed. As far as the other ones, I would just leave them alone unless they're injured. Then you could contact us and we'll see if there's anything that we can help with. But if you take them somewhere, they are going to probably be put down. So that's just not a good idea. Next. Okay, so now I'm really excited to let Grace talk. She's got about 10 years of experience working in the veterinary industry, 5 years working directly in animal shelters and sanctuaries, and she has a ton of knowledge. She has a bachelor's of science in zoology, and she is a certified veterinary assistant in the state of Colorado. And her background makes her very uniquely qualified to discuss both rescue and what to do when you find wildlife. Carol, can you unmute Grace?
Hi, can you guys hear me okay? All right. So thanks for letting me talk. I wanted to talk a little bit about wildlife because this is something that I've had a lot of questions about in my past. A lot of the time when working in the vet field, in animal shelters, people working in that field and even people in things like law enforcement had a lot of questions about that. And a lot of that reason is because there is a lot of legal processes surrounding wildlife. They have protection on a county level, on a state level, on a federal level in many cases, like the Migratory Bird Act or the Marine Mammal Protection Act. When you look at health agencies that are county, state, and federally recognized, those also can have an impact on how we handle wildlife. So for that reason, it's really important to do what you can to minimize contact because there are so many regulations in place. So our top priority is keeping wildlife wild. We're going to want to assess each situation where wildlife appears to need help, see if this is a case where they need help. The most common calls that I've had always regard baby wildlife, so baby birds and baby mammals. In general, you're going to want to leave them alone or work on reuniting. With squirrels and birds, the most popular way to get them back, and I've personally done this as well and gotten a robin reunited with their parents, is using a small box or berry basket, line that with some tissue and paper towel. You can tie that in a branch in a tree where you have seen the parent most commonly, get them in there. That way they can be either moved or have this become a new makeshift nest. There are exceptions to this case though, when we're talking about baby animals. When we're talking about opossums, that's a very special case because they're marsupials. They don't use a nest for the babies to be left at on their own in general. They're going to be carrying them with them. So if you see a baby opossum, they have been left behind or abandoned. So that one is going to need rescue. Or if you see what looks like small grains of rice, I had a picture attached here. These are fly eggs, and this would mean that they are no longer being cared for by their mother. Naturally, she would groom those off. So if you see them, it's important to get them care right away. And this also goes for kittens. I have worked with neonatal kittens that had these as well. So if you see those, that's going to require veterinary intervention. With baby birds, I strongly recommend that people check in online about the fledgling stage. If they've got a general idea of the species, or if they can, again, Google Lens them. A fledgling ideally will not be moved. Their survival rates are much lower if they're removed from their parents. So getting an idea of what you are looking at so that way they can continue to learn how to fly with their parents rather than being removed when it's unnecessary. Vector species are kind of a special case. These are species that can spread rabies. Most species of wildlife could spread zoonotic disease to you as is, which is another reason that we want to minimize contact. But specifically when we are talking about species that can spread rabies, they have significant legal challenges there. Because of that, facilities need to be careful how they house them. So for example, Seabird Station is a fantastic wildlife rescue, but they're still in the works of getting a quarantine place set up for their possible vector species such as raccoons. So they may refer you to somewhere like bush wildlife. So that is something to consider when you are looking at rescue for these animals. It's also important to know that because of their ability to carry these diseases, that there is a lot in place to make sure that people don't get sick or that they are able to test them if needed. And the unfortunate thing about rabies is it is 100% of the time fatal if symptoms show. So if an animal has rabies and is showing signs of rabies, there is not a treatment plan in place. It also means that unfortunately for humans, if they were exposed to rabies, they need to immediately begin a shot series. So because of that, vector species have very special treatment in legal cases. If a raccoon, bat, or skunk, or other common species like that are touched by a person, essentially every time that animal is going to be euthanized and tested for rabies, which uses the brain tissue sample. That reason is we really encourage not touching those species. It's not just for your safety, but for the animal's survival. So if those species are found in a situation where they need assistance, do as much as you can to try and put distance between you and that animal, using gloves, ideally a mask. Have a heart traps or something that I'm very fond of because they prevent the need to touch them directly. Blankets, boxes, whatever you can use to minimize contact. And that goes for not only vector species, but other wildlife as well, because it keeps them safe, it keeps you safe, and it makes them more likely for them to be able to be released in the future because they are less familiarized with human contact. Situations where you do want to get involved with wildlife are pretty select. There are situations where you really don't need to. Ideally, like I said, with baby animals that can be reunited, situations where an animal may have a congenital defect, so they may be born with a deformed foot, they may just be a little bit different looking. That doesn't require assistance necessarily, but situations where an animal might be injured by humans is a very common one, unfortunately, like arrows or BBs in them, stuck in trash, and one that people don't always know is cat attacks always must be brought in. Birds, even if they seem fine, if they have been bitten by a cat or grabbed by a cat, the bacteria in the claws or in the bites requires almost immediate intervention with antibiotics. So if you see that, please do bring them in for treatment so they can get that started. Again, try and kind of weigh out the situations that the animals may need because there is a higher survival rate in the wild and it does keep everybody a little bit safer. So with wildlife, encourage keeping wildlife wild. know your local wildlife, so you know if they are native or non-native and where you can bring these animals. So in the case of an emergency, you can do that. And what to have as a plan for if you do need to take them in, like having tools like a Have-A-Heart, having spare gloves or a towel, and knowing where you would keep them, where you'd come across them. With babies and birds, I always want to make sure people know not to try and feed them if they do get them in their home. Aspiration pneumonia is a very common killer of baby squirrels and rabbits that people are attempting to bottle feed, thinking that they're doing the right thing before they get into sanctuary, but they should be fine overnight. If you need to wait to bring them in, it's important to just give them that space, give it a little bit of time, and when they go in the next day, appropriate formula and bottles will be used for them. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I know wildlife is a difficult subject because there are so many species and it can be confusing to know when to step in or help them out. But we see them every day, and I appreciate that people are out there trying to help them out and do what they can to help them.
Thank you so much, Grace. I also wanted to say, I forgot to say it earlier in the webinar, that one of the issues that a lot of people have is that they don't have a plan in place. So they might be on their way to work or on their way somewhere, and they come across a dog and they just drive away and post on Facebook, there's a dog on the street, somebody go get the dog. They move. They're not going to be there when somebody goes for the most part. So that, try to have a plan in place, because this happens so often. Think, will your work allow you to bring a cat or dog or, you know, rabbit or something in? Do you have parents here? Do you have friends? Do you know anybody? Do you have a secure place in your home? A box, anything? You know, obviously a larger dog, you can't do that, but do you have a secure yard maybe that with some shade and water and food somewhere that the, you know, animal won't be left in the street? Try to plan now. That's one of the reasons that we had this webinar, so that people can have a plan in place instead of just posting and hoping that somebody else goes to do it. Also, I think we can go to the next slide. I just wanted to point out as well that we have a whole bunch of animals that need fosters or adopters. So if you or you know anybody that's looking for rabbits, especially pigs, we have some roosters, a couple of them that are domesticated that need homes. And we have some other rescues that we work with that have some dogs and a couple of kittens. So we have plenty of animals. Check out our website at floridaanimalrescuealliance.org, and you can go to our Adopt Us page and see which animals that we have available. So do we have any questions? Does anybody have questions? And if you do, raise your Zoom hand and Carol can unmute you, or you can put your questions in the chat. Either way is fine. Were we that thorough? Juan has a question. Carol, can you unmute Juan?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you for coming,
Great.
Juan.
Thank you so much for this presentation. This is very valuable because a lot of times many people just really don't know what to do. So it's a good starting point. I have a question regarding to what does fostering mean, as far as like, what's the expectation if somebody decides to foster an animal? Does it depend on the animal? How long can somebody expect to foster somebody? And what do we need to have in place in order to foster? And what kind of work do we as the foster parents do to find a permanent home for the animals, or is there outside assistance for that?
Yes, usually there is outside assistance for that. So foster is like a temporary home for the animal until a permanent home is found. So it would depend on the animal that you're looking to foster, and we would have to make sure that the home is right for that animal, that it's safe or whatever, you know, for each different animal. Like if you have a pig, you can't live in an apartment, you know what I mean? So it's kind of gotta, and then typically, if you're fostering, you would just be expected to feed the animal. If the animal is with the rescue, then typically any medical costs would be handled by the rescue if the animal gets sick. And now, as far as how long the animal would be with you, it just depends. It depends on the animal. It depends on how fast somebody is found. I mean, you could, if you're fostering, let's just say, you could always look for a permanent home as well. And then the rescues would be looking for a home as well. So it just, we don't know. Carol, do you want to speak out a little bit on this?
Yes, I'd say it all depends on the animal. When it comes to what is needed, like for on our behalf, we always have an application. So say you wanted to foster a rabbit right now, we would send you an application and you would have to fill out that application, and then we would review it to ensure that you are fit to foster that particular baby. We want to make sure that you have adequate space for them, that you have experience for them, and if you do not have experience with them, that you're willing to learn, that we're willing to provide you with such documentation where you're willing to more than willing to just, take every precaution, to provide safety for them, whatever is needed. And then also that you do have a way to contact us immediately if anything does happen. When it comes to finding them a forever home for us, we would help out with that. But like, for example, right now, Grace is fostering one of the bunnies from our network. And she helps out by contacting people that she knows, but at the same time, we have volunteers from our group reaching out to other sanctuaries and just rescues to see whether they're willing to take them in right now. It really depends on the animal, honestly, but we do have, like for us, we have always documents and forms to make sure that the baby is taken care of, and like you are taking care of yourself, and everything is gone in the legal process pretty much.
Great, thank you.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
I'm going to drop the link in the chat for the rescue list. Right now, it's just not complete, but I'm going to update it a little more as we go. So there's mostly cat and dog information on there, but that's usually what people find on a daily basis. So I think that's the most important. Yes, Ocean wants to ask a question. Could you unmute him, please?
So I'm asking a situation based off of a real life experience. One time me and my friend were on a walk and we found some people that were trying to get a cat, like a baby kitten out of a bush. And it was like a thick bush, it took a while to get through. And we did not succeed in even getting the cat. We got it out of the bush, it ran out, but we lost it. And then the next day, we actually could hear it meowing again, and we started our search again. I had my mom come and everything. And I was wondering because what ended up happening was the cat got into a car and then it started storming. And the next day, it seemed to be out of the car entirely. Like, there was no cat anymore. There was no kitten. And the thing is that we live next to this neighborhood that kind of has a cat colony. And so I guess I'd like to make sure that I can take precaution and know whether this cat belongs there or not. And I want to know like how I can be able to tell that this cat's going to be okay and stuff.
Grace, do you want
Yeah, Grace, I was part of the situation, so if you could help us out here.
Honestly, one of the things you can do, it sounds like, is there's a lot of people who are set up as feeders in the area you could check with. To me, if they are in a situation where they are in need of help, like if you're noticing that they are a kitten, they are in a thick bush, if they're trying to get in cars, if they're not so feral that you can't catch them yourself, I would suggest taking them in and giving it some time, seeing if there is a mother around in the area, if there is a feeder around in the area, and seeing what you can do first. If they can get care first with you, that's probably the safest option for a kitten. If there seems to be a feeder in place that you do know that you can talk to about it, that's great. But if you don't see them and you're looking at a situation like there is a storm coming in, that they are near a lot of traffic, there are stray dogs walking around, it's probably a good idea to take them in and assess for the future what can be done. Also, kittens as young as 8 weeks can be spayed or neutered. So not a terrible idea to hold on to them for that purpose as well. So again, kind of dependent on situations, but if it was those circumstances, to me, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with, if you were capable of catching them, bringing them in and assessing what to do from there if they can be away from their mother.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So
Again, this is totally different for Florida. In general, a lot of places you could say, no, just get them into a rescue situation. But because of the very high amount of cats here, it's a little bit more difficult to find rescue options. There's a lot more colony managers here, and it's overall very different circumstances from what a lot of us are used to.
Yeah, I have also, like Grace, lived, in other parts like California and Maryland, and you just don't see cats like this. This was, if you find a cat, you can either keep the kitten or take to a rescue. There's no mom around, somebody dumped the kitten. It's a very rare situation, but here is just different. We do have a question in the chat that asks, is there any resource or comprehensive list of rescues nationwide, online or otherwise? That's a good question. I don't know, Carol, I haven't looked nationwide. I've been looking here to compile our list, but I'm not.
I know that if we're looking at dogs, there are nationwide ones for breed-specific rescues in general. I believe that despite all their flaws, AKC does have a resource for breed-specific rescues on their website. That one you can use if you find an animal of a specific breed or a dog of a specific breed. And last I checked, there are some through farm sanctuary networks to try and understand what farm sanctuaries are in the area, but just due to the amount of shelters and rescues going in and out, because it's such a fluctuating field really for availability and resources, that can change on any day. So I know that it's kind of hard to have a comprehensive list for a lot of those.
yeah, and for the most part, guys, like Grace said, there most likely is a list from Farm Sanctuary or other organizations out there, but we focus mainly in the state of Florida. Our goal is just to help out sanctuaries within the state of Florida, and unfortunately, there are so many animals out there that we wish we could help in other states, and we might surprise you, but yeah, we try to focus and stay within the state.
I think the thing is too, I believe that we have a lot more animals need than in other states. I was one of the rescues that I found yesterday that Carol, you had also sent to me. They help to get cats up in north where there's less cats so that they can get adopted. So, because they don't have the amount of cats that we have here, it's easier to find homes for them somewhere that's not here. We do have I used to volunteer at the Humane Society in Miami, and they do not put any healthy animals or animals that can be treated down at all. They only put animals that are going to die, ever down. But you know, some of the cats that they've had there, they have for years. I just had found when I showed Carol, there's a cat that has been there for about 6 years because they just don't get adopted here since there's so many strays.
And just to piggyback off what Nicole said, the same thing can be said for pigs, honestly.
Mhm.
Eastern Snouts is one of the organizations within our group, and they are overwhelmed with the amount of pigs that are released and surrendered or just found within the state of Florida. They don't get as many calls as they get from the state of Florida, and it's just extremely overwhelming. It's gotten to the same point that cats and dogs are pretty much found. So,
Any
anybody
other
have
questions?
more questions?
Well, we're gonna send out the list also by email of sanctuaries to everybody. So that you have the link, and it's going to be an ongoing link. We're also going to send out the recording of the webinar. So in the event that you forget any information, or you want to revisit it, or you find a dog or a cat and you want to help, you can look back at the video. So
Let's send a very quick shout out to our allies, as well as everyone within our network. So again, the reason why we did this today is because we wanted everyone that's out there, whenever you're taking a walk and you find an animal or you see an animal that is hurt, just to take accountability. Do not just drop it off somewhere and just, you know, expect the sanctuary to take care of it. Oh, there's more questions actually, Nicole.
yeah. One wants to know, this is a good one. I actually don't know. I think Grace might know. When iguanas are in a frozen state, or when iguanas are in a frozen state when it's cold in the winter, is there anything that we should do?
For that, for what I have heard, is moving them to a safe place where they aren't going to be accessed by predators, which includes
Okay.
dogs, cats, things like that, and leaving them until they get to a point where it's warm. Again, with moving them, gloves, they are spreaders of salmonella, so it's important to have that. But you can move them to an area where that can be avoided. I would not wake them up from it if you aren't expecting them to scramble around the room they are in. So if you're going to move them somewhere that they're going to stay, move them with gloves, put them somewhere secure where they're not going to be grabbed. Again, you can use the laundry basket method, upside down on top of them with a brick on top of it until they wake up, because they are going to flip that thing as soon as they wake up. But just make sure they're out of the way and don't make an attempt to wake them up until it is time for them to naturally wake up. Getting them out of it, the hibernation state or torpor, is going to make it so that they're probably going to go right back in as soon as they're exposed to it again. It'll be a little bit easier on their bodies if they stay in that as long as necessary and then come out of it when needed. They can surprisingly be in there a long time. Like, you know,
Really?
people who've had pet bearded dragons will know that sometimes animals will go into that state of hibernation for quite a long time. Not very common with iguanas because they are tropical and it doesn't really occur for them naturally now. But they should be okay even if it comes to a few days.
Yeah, that's good to know. I do know that they are pretty dangerous with their claws, so you want to be super careful, super careful. And also, if somebody does have an iguana in their yard, because this happened to my neighbor, an iguana fell in there, you don't want to call a trapper because they can't re-release the animals, so they have to destroy them. She had her husband get in the car and they took the iguana down the street. They forced him to, but that was very, like, that doesn't happen, and that's only because I was kind of hysterical. But they had called a trapper. So just if you have a neighbor with the issue, just tell them to try to tell them to leave the iguana or whatever other non-native species it is alone, and the animal will usually get out themselves. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, oh shoot, now I forget, of course, but it was about non-natives as well. It's just, well, just basically that they can't be re-released anywhere. So anybody that you call to move the animal is going to euthanize them or put them down unless you're calling like a sanctuary or a rescue that specializes in that. So it's better if you just try to convince everybody to leave them alone. Oh, this was what it was. Just because an animal is non-native, supposedly, unless you are a legalized trapper that can destroy the animal, but if you're not, it is still illegal to harm the animals. So people are not allowed to just go kicking the ducks or the pigeons or shoot it. Well, iguanas, supposedly you are allowed to shoot them in Florida. But the other animals, to my knowledge, from what I've seen online, you're not allowed to. They still have to, they're still protected against animal abuse.
The weird exception I have learned is peacocks. Peacocks have protections under the Miami-Dade Municipal Code. You can't do anything about them and they will not be harmed. So if you do see one that's injured, they will be treated at wildlife sanctuaries or they can get assistance through the county. I don't know why. I think it's because they are pretty and they have that privilege, but they are written into the Miami-Dade Code as protected species.
The same thing is with cats. I don't think they're so protected in Broward because I've heard some pretty bad horror stories up there. But in Miami-Dade, you are not allowed to hurt the cats. If you see somebody harming the cats, poisoning the cats, kicking them, removing them, whatever they're doing, they will be arrested. So you should report that to the authorities. It is illegal to harm any stray or community cats in this county. So I think we're done. Thank you guys so much for coming. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach out and we'll be happy to answer anything for you.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.